Rain splattered against the cracked pavement, forming muddy puddles around the man sitting near the subway entrance. Rafik sat there, his back pressed against the cold wall, his fingers stiff from holding an old paper cup that had more raindrops than coins. He had been sitting in that same spot for years, invisible to the thousands of shoes that walked past him daily. Nobody asked how he got there. Nobody cared. He had become part of the background, another piece of the city's forgotten furniture. His beard was messy, his eyes dull, and his soul tired. He had stopped counting days, stopped dreaming, stopped believing there could be anything more than this endless gray routine of survival. Once, he was a man with pride. He built beautiful furniture, carved from wood with precision and love. People admired his work, and he took pride in crafting something with his hands. But one tragic accident at the workshop, a collapsing plank, shattered more than his hand. It shattered his confidence. He could no longer hold the chisel properly, and soon orders stopped coming. When the money ran out, his landlord threw him out. Friends disappeared. The world became a cold blur of rejection. He started to believe that maybe he wasn't meant for success, that maybe destiny had chosen him for the streets. That thought became his prison. That afternoon, when the sky turned gray and the smell of wet asphalt filled the air, an elderly man stopped in front of him. Rafik looked up, expecting another pity coin. But the old man didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he looked directly into Rafik's eyes, not with disgust or sympathy, but curiosity. "Tell me something," the man said calmly. "Why do you beg?" Rafik chuckled dryly. "Because I've got no other choice, old man. Life decided I wasn't good enough." The stranger smiled faintly. "Life didn't say that. You did." Rafik frowned, confused. The man pulled a small mirror from his coat pocket and handed it to him. "Look at him," he said softly. "That's the only person who can change everything for you." Rafik stared at the reflection, the wrinkles, the dirt, the hopeless eyes. For a second, he saw something deeper behind them, something alive that refused to die. "What's your point?" he muttered. The old man's eyes gleamed. "You think you're poor because you don't have money. But poverty isn't in the pocket. It's in the mind. Change your thoughts, and life will change with them." Before Rafik could speak, the man turned and walked away into the rain, disappearing into the blur of umbrellas and headlights. Rafik sat there, gripping the mirror. He didn't beg that night. For the first time in years, he stared at his reflection and whispered, "Maybe it's not too late." The next morning, the city woke up in its usual rush. People hurried to offices, buses hissed, horns blared, and the world kept spinning, but Rafik felt like something inside him had stopped and restarted differently. The mirror the old man gave him lay beside him, glinting faintly under the sun. He picked it up again and stared. The reflection hadn't changed, but something about the way he looked at himself had. He noticed the lines of struggle, but also the quiet strength beneath them. For the first time in a decade, he whispered to his own reflection, "You used to build things. You can build again." It felt foolish, but also strangely freeing. He walked down the block, searching for something to do, anything that didn't involve begging. At a construction site, he offered to help move scrap wood. The foreman laughed when he saw his worn clothes. "Man, you look like you can barely lift yourself," he said, but Rafik insisted. "Just give me a chance. If I don't work, don't pay me." The man shrugged and agreed. Rafik worked through the morning, his palms raw, his back aching, but every swing of effort felt like he was hammering his old self back together. At the end of the day, the foreman tossed him a few dollars and a bottle of water. "Didn't expect you to last an hour," he said. "You surprised me." Rafik smiled faintly. It wasn't much, but it was earned. That night, he bought a sandwich instead of waiting for someone's leftovers. Sitting by the same subway entrance, he ate slowly, savoring every bite. Each chew tasted like dignity. The following days were harder. His body ached from labor. He wasn't always hired, and sometimes he went hungry again. But his mindset had begun to shift. Whenever hopelessness crept in, he would take out the mirror, look at himself, and repeat the old man's words. "Change your thoughts, life will kneel before you." Weeks passed. He found odd jobs carrying bricks, cleaning tools, even repairing wooden pallets. Slowly, people began to notice his discipline. One afternoon, the same foreman called him over. "You got a steady hand," he said. "You ever work with wood before?" Rafik nodded. "Used to build furniture," he said quietly. The man grinned. "We've got some custom carpentry work coming up. You want in?" That night, Rafik didn't sleep on the pavement. He sat under the city lights, staring at the skyline, the mirror still in his pocket. For years, he had begged life for mercy. Now, for the first time, he realized life had been waiting for him to change his mind. Rafik arrived at the construction site early the next morning, long before the others showed up. The sky was still dark, a faint pink line forming on the horizon. He ran his hands over the pieces of wood stacked in a corner, the smell of sawdust stirring old memories. It had been so long since he'd touched lumber with purpose. His injured hand trembled a little, the old pain flaring, but he ignored it. He had something stronger now, belief. The foreman handed him basic tools and pointed toward a small project. "We need benches for the workers' rest area. Think you can handle it?" Rafik nodded without hesitation. The first few cuts were uneven, the hammer slipped, his grip weak, but slowly his rhythm returned. By noon, the bench began to take shape, imperfect, but solid, honest, real. When the foreman passed by, he stopped and stared. "You made that?" Rafik nodded. "I used to do this for a living." The man studied his work again and gave a nod of approval. "You've still got it." He didn't say much else, but that one sentence filled Rafik with more energy than any meal could. He worked until sunset, polishing the bench until it gleamed. When he sat on it, sweat dripping from his face, he smiled for the first time in years. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was rebuilding himself, one nail at a time. Over the next few months, things began to change. Rafik saved every dollar he could, sleeping near the site, eating little, refusing to spend on anything unnecessary. The men who once laughed at him started asking for his help. "Hey, Rafik, can you show me how you sand those corners so smooth?" "Hey man, you got magic hands." Each compliment added a new brick to his confidence. He started taking on side projects, repairing chairs, fixing old tables, making shelves from leftover wood. Soon, word spread around the neighborhood about the quiet man who worked miracles with scrap wood. One evening, as he was packing up, the old man who had given him the mirror appeared again. He looked exactly the same, calm eyes, gentle smile, the same worn coat. "You kept it," he said, noticing the mirror in Rafik's pocket. Rafik smiled, his eyes misty. "I did more than keep it. I used it." The old man chuckled softly. "You didn't change your life. You changed your thoughts." Life just followed. Before Rafik could thank him, the man patted his shoulder and walked away into the fading sunlight. Rafik stood there for a long time, watching him go, realizing he had just experienced the law of polarity. He had turned rock bottom into the foundation of his comeback. Winter crept into the city, and the chill made every breath sting, but Rafik didn't feel the cold like he used to. He was too focused, too alive. His days were filled with sawdust, hammer strikes, and the smell of varnish. He had rented a tiny storage shed behind the construction site, which he now used as a small workshop. It was barely big enough for a workbench and his tools, but to him, it felt like a palace. Each morning, he unlocked it with trembling hands, whispering, "Let's build something new today." That little space became his temple, the place where he prayed with wood instead of words. He had saved almost $2,000 by now, small jobs piling up from people who wanted handmade shelves, chairs, or tables. His craftsmanship was slow, but precise, and people admired the care he put into each piece. Still, every night before closing the shop, he took out the small mirror from his pocket and stared at his reflection. He reminded himself where he had come from. The street, the hunger, the hopelessness. It kept him humble and hungry, in a different way now. One day, a woman stopped by his shed while he was working on a coffee table. She was dressed sharply, her car shining like money itself. "Did you make that bench outside?" she asked. Rafik nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Yes, ma'am, just finished it last week." She ran her fingers along the smooth surface and smiled. "It's beautiful. My company's opening a new cafe downtown. We need this kind of work, honest, handmade. Can you handle big orders?" Rafik hesitated, his mind flashing back to the days when he begged for coins. The thought of managing something large terrified him. But then, he remembered the mirror and the old man's words. He took a deep breath. "Yes, ma'am, I can handle it." Within a week, he was swamped with orders. Tables, chairs, counters, all designed and built by his hands. He hired 2 men from the construction site to help him. They were both homeless, just like he once was. He paid them fairly and told them the same thing he had once been told: change your mindset, and life will follow. Months passed, and Rafiq's small shed became a busy little workshop. His business got a name, Second Chance Woodworks. Customers loved not only his craftsmanship but his story. Every piece he built carried a bit of his soul, proof that the poorest man can become rich the moment he decides to think differently. By the time spring arrived, Rafiq's life looked nothing like it had before. His workshop, once a small shed filled with scraps, had grown into a proper studio space downtown. The sign above the door read, Second Chance Woodworks, carved in bold letters he had made himself. Every time he looked at it, his chest filled with quiet pride. It wasn't about fame or money, it was about freedom. He was no longer at the mercy of life. He was creating it, shaping it, sanding it smooth with his own hands. Orders came in faster than he could manage. Local restaurants wanted custom tables. Families asked for personalized furniture. Even interior designers reached out to collaborate. He hired more workers, giving jobs to people who had once shared the streets with him. Each new hire reminded him of who he used to be, not to pity them, but to show them what was possible. He never lectured. He simply told them, if you can change your story here, pointing to his head, you can change it out there. One afternoon, a reporter from a local newspaper visited. She had heard about the Millionaire Beggar, a man who went from asking for coins to signing paychecks. During the interview, she asked, what was the turning point? What made you start over? Rafiq smiled faintly, holding the same old mirror in his hand. This, he said, a stranger gave me this mirror years ago. Told me to look at my partner in success, myself. Took me a while to understand, but once I did, everything changed. His story went viral. Videos, articles, and social media posts called him an inspiration, a symbol of transformation. Big investors approached him with offers, but Rafiq stayed grounded. He believed real wealth wasn't money, it was mindset. He continued mentoring others, teaching not only carpentry but confidence. He taught that even broken hands could build something strong if the mind was steady. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the workshop filled with golden light, Rafiq closed early and walked to the old subway entrance, the same place where he once begged. The walls were covered in graffiti now, but the spot still carried the ghost of his past. He sat quietly for a few minutes, the mirror in his hand, whispering a soft thank you to the universe and to the old man who changed everything with one sentence. He didn't see the man again, but sometimes, when the wind blew just right, he could almost hear his voice, change your thoughts, and life will kneel before you. Rafiq smiled. Life had indeed knelt, not because he was lucky, but because he had learned how to stand. Years passed, and, Second Chance Woodworks, grew beyond what Rafiq had ever imagined. His furniture wasn't just sold locally anymore, it was being shipped across states. Designers from Los Angeles and New York placed orders, and magazines featured his story as the carpenter who built himself. Yet Rafiq remained the same quiet, humble man who still wore the same old leather jacket and kept that tiny mirror in his pocket. Every morning before unlocking his workshop, he looked into it, not to admire himself, but to remind his soul of where he began. It kept him grounded in gratitude, and that gratitude became his daily fuel. One afternoon, he hosted a small event at his factory to celebrate 5 years of business. Reporters, clients, and his workers gathered, clapping as he took the small stage. Behind him stood rows of handcrafted tables, each telling a story of resilience. He cleared his throat and spoke slowly, his voice steady but emotional. 5 years ago, I was sitting outside a subway station begging for coins. Today, I employ 30 people and feed dozens of families. But I didn't get lucky, I got conscious. The moment I changed how I saw myself, life started changing how it treated me. The crowd fell silent, moved. Some of his workers had tears in their eyes. They knew he wasn't just talking, he was living proof. After the event, as people left, a young man approached him nervously. His clothes were torn, his eyes tired, and his hands shook the way Rafiq's once had. Sir, I don't have a place to stay. I just need a chance. Rafiq studied him quietly, recognizing the same desperation he once carried. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the mirror. For a moment, his fingers lingered on it, the object that had changed his life. Then he handed it to the boy. Keep it, he said softly. This mirror changed my life once. Look into it every morning and remember, that's the person who can save you. The boy looked confused but took it carefully, nodding. That night, Rafiq walked home under the glowing city lights, his hands empty but his heart full. He smiled to himself, thinking about how the law of polarity had completed its circle. He had gone from beggar to builder, from hopeless to helpful. The universe had tested him, broken him, rebuilt him, and now used him as a tool to lift others. As he reached his doorstep, he paused and looked up at the sky. "Thank you," he whispered, not to any one person, but to life itself. He knew now that everything changes the moment your mind does, because when you change your mindset, life has no choice but to change with it.